Okay, so you've given us quite a bit to unpack this time. It's a really interesting collection of sources. And I think, as always, what we're hoping to do is distill these down into, well, first of all, insights that you can use that are
Yep.
practical,
Yeah.
and also kind of the core ideas that we see running through all of this material.
Yeah. What seems to jump out immediately from this collection is this whole idea of perspective.
Mm.
Like it's all invented idea.
It's all invented. Yeah, and that idea applies to, our personal relationships.
Absolutely.
It applies to how we solve problems.
Yeah.
It applies to how we see, like, the very nature of reality even.
Yes, yes.
So we've got stories, anecdotes, principles, and practices that we're going to try to synthesize in a way that would make sense to, let's say, somebody who's got a really sharp mind.
That's our goal. Yeah.
Right. And so we're going to explain it to this genius
Yeah.
in a way that they would be like, oh, yeah, okay, I get that. That makes sense to me.
I understand that. And I can use it.
And I can use it. Yeah.
So to get right into this core concept,
Hmm.
the power of perspective, we have this great story about the marketing scouts in Africa.
Right. The shoe story.
The shoe story.
Yeah. So it's one of those classic anecdotes.
It is a classic. And the reason it's a classic is it makes the point so well. You've got these two marketing scouts, and they're sent to this part of Africa, and they're supposed to send back telegrams about whether or not there's a market for shoes in this part of Africa.
Right.
And one sends back, situation hopeless, nobody wears shoes.
Yep. No market here.
And the other sends back, glorious opportunity, nobody has shoes.
So it really shows you how, like, the same objective reality can be interpreted two totally different ways.
Absolutely. Your mindset, your preconceived ideas, your biases, they all influence how you interpret the same situation.
And it makes me think about, we talk about, like, reality being subjective or being invented.
Yeah, yeah.
It makes me think about that experiment with the Minin people
Oh, yeah, in Ethiopia.
in Ethiopia who couldn't read photographs.
Right. Because photographs, they're so commonplace for us. We just automatically see that as, a representation of reality.
Of course.
But for people who have never encountered that convention, that technology, it doesn't have that meaning.
Right. They literally could not see what we see when we look at a photograph.
Right. They saw shapes, they saw colors, but it didn't translate into a three-dimensional representation in their minds, which I think also brings us to the Picasso anecdote about his wife.
Oh, right. Where someone shows him a snapshot and he's like, oh, she's quite small and flat.
Exactly. And what's interesting about that is, again, it's highlighting the abstract nature of a photograph. We forget, because we're so accustomed to it, that it's a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional reality. And Picasso, with his artistic eye, immediately picked up on that inherent abstraction.
Yeah. It makes me think about, like, how our minds are always trying to create narratives, even when, like, there isn't a clear narrative there.
That's a good point.
Our dreams are a good example.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Dreams are a perfect example because we have these bizarre, often nonsensical images and experiences, but our mind tries to piece them together into some kind of story.
Right. And this even happens when we're awake.
Absolutely. We do it all the time.
Yeah.
We rationalize our decisions. We come up with reasons for our actions. And sometimes those reasons might be completely fabricated, and we might not even be aware that we're doing it. And this is actually backed up by research. There's some fascinating studies done with people who have specific brain lesions. And what they found is one side of the brain might initiate an action, and the other side, without missing a beat, will come up with a perfectly reasonable explanation.
Wow.
Even though that explanation has nothing to do with the actual reason for the action. It's just like hardwired to create a story. Exactly. We have this deep-seated need to make sense of the world, even if it means inventing reasons. And it's not just in personal, psychology. I mean, this actually plays out in science as well. Think about the shift from Newtonian physics to Einsteinian physics.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, that was a complete paradigm shift. It was a new way of seeing the universe, and it allowed us to see things that were previously invisible.
Right.
Like the bending of space-time. It's almost like, a frog that's evolved to see in a certain spectrum of light suddenly having a whole new set of colors revealed to it.
That's like we put on, new glasses.
Exactly. And it's not that Newtonian physics was wrong, it was just limited. It worked within a certain framework. But Einstein's theories provided a broader framework that allowed for a much richer understanding of the universe. So this highlights a key point. progress often comes not just from gathering more data, but from adopting a new way of interpreting the data we already have.
Right. And I think a perfect, almost playful illustration of this is the 9-dot puzzle.
Oh, yeah, I love that puzzle.
So for those who haven't come across it, you have these 9 dots arranged in a square, right?
Right.
And the challenge is to connect all the dots with 4 straight lines without lifting your pen from the paper.
And most people, when they first encounter this puzzle, they automatically assume they have to stay within the boundaries of the square formed by the dots.
Right. And that's the trap.
It is, because the solution requires you to literally think outside the box, to extend your lines beyond the perceived boundaries of that square.
And it's so frustrating because once you see the solution, it's so simple.
It is. But until you break free from that self-imposed limitation, it seems impossible.
And, that's such a powerful metaphor for so many of the challenges we face in life. We often create these invisible boundaries for ourselves.
Absolutely. And we get stuck in certain patterns of thinking in fixed frameworks without even realizing it. And those limitations prevent us from seeing the solutions that might be right in front of us.
So when we say it's all invented, what we're really talking about is recognizing the power of these stories we tell ourselves, these often unconscious assumptions that shape our reality.
Exactly. And by becoming aware of those underlying frameworks, by noticing those boxes we've put ourselves in, we can start to break free from them.
Now, it's important to point out, this doesn't mean that we can just magically manifest anything we want into existence.
Of course not.
It's not about the power of positive thinking or anything like that.
Right. We can't just wish things into being.
But what we can do is consciously choose and shift our frameworks to create conditions that make the outcomes we desire more likely.
Absolutely. By recognizing the invented nature of reality, we gain a degree of agency that we might not have realized we had. It empowers us to take a more active role in shaping our lives.
Okay, so you've been talking about this idea of reality being invented. It makes me think about something you've talked about in the past, this distinction between what you call the world of measurement and the realm of possibility.
Oh, yeah, that's a key distinction. So think of the world of measurement as that everyday experience where we're constantly evaluating, comparing, judging. It's a world of, grades, scales, assessments.
Right, you're either good or you're bad.
You're either a success or a failure. There's always a sense of scarcity, not enough time, money, resources. And we often end up in this kind of competitive mindset, a hierarchy, where we're trying to climb the ladder and prove that we're better than the next person.
So it feels like we're always navigating a minefield, kind of.
Yes, exactly. There's that underlying feeling of, walking on eggshells, afraid of making a mistake, of being judged, of failing, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're either winning or losing.
Exactly.
There's not a lot of room for just being.
Right. And in contrast to that, we have the realm of possibility. And this is a place we've all experienced at some point, whether it's, witnessing the birth of a child or experiencing a profound moment of connection in nature or listening to a piece of music that just moves you to tears.
Yeah, it's those moments where you kind of lose yourself almost.
Exactly. That self-consciousness fades away, the constant assessment, the judgment, it all seems to dissolve.
You're just present.
You're just present. And there's a sense of flow, of unity, of limitless possibility. It's almost like, the laws of physics no longer apply.
Right. And, it's interesting because you bring up music.
Yeah.
And what we've talked before about, you're a conductor. And I wonder, have you experienced this in your work with music?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are times when, I'm conducting an orchestra and it's like we're all breathing together. We become this single unified entity and the music just flows through us. It's an incredibly powerful experience.
So it sounds like the realm of possibility is really about tapping into that deeper sense of connection.
Exactly. And recognizing that the limitations we often perceive are in many ways self-imposed. It's about shifting our focus from scarcity to abundance, from judgment to acceptance.
And in your source material, there's this intriguing concept called the practice of giving an A.
Ah, yes.
And I got to admit, when I first heard about this, I was a little skeptical.
I understand that.
Because it's like, okay, we're not all A students, right?
Right.
There are real differences in skill, in talent, in accomplishment.
Of course.
So how do we reconcile this idea of giving an A with the reality of different levels of performance.
Well, the point of giving an A isn't to pretend that everyone is performing at the same level or to ignore real differences in ability.
Okay.
It's about shifting the focus away from judgment and towards possibility. It's about recognizing the inherent potential in every individual, regardless of where they are at any given moment.
So I think the story of the Taiwanese student who was initially confused when he was told he was an A student really illustrates this.
Oh, yeah. He was like, but I'm number 68 in my class.
Exactly. And he couldn't understand how he could be an A student. And then he had this realization that both the 68 and the A were essentially invented labels.
That's the key insight. Right.
They're arbitrary. So he might as well choose the one that brought more light into his life, the one that empowered him to see himself as capable and worthy of success.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really profound point. We have a choice in the narratives we adopt for ourselves. We can choose to focus on our perceived limitations, or we can choose to embrace the possibility of growth and transformation.
So how does giving an A actually play out in practice? Like, can you give me an example of what this might look like in a real-world situation?
Sure. Think about a teacher working with a student. Now, in the traditional model, the teacher might focus on evaluating the student's performance, pointing out their mistakes, giving them a grade that reflects their current level of achievement.
Right.
And that's not necessarily wrong, but it can create a dynamic where the student feels judged, where their worth is tied to their performance.
Yeah.
But now imagine that same teacher approaching the student with the mindset of giving an A. The focus shifts from evaluation to possibility. The teacher acknowledges the student's current abilities, but they also see the student's potential, the A that's waiting to be realized. And this creates completely different dynamic. The student feels supported, encouraged, and empowered to take risks and strive for growth.
Right. It's like the teacher saying, I believe in you. I see your potential, and I'm here to help you achieve it.
Exactly. And I think this giving an A mindset can be applied in so many different contexts, not just in education.
Yeah.
Think about a manager working with an employee, a parent interacting with their child.
It makes me think of that story you told about your high school English teacher.
Oh, yes. Right.
One where you turned in an assignment last minute.
It was the night before it was due.
And she gave you an A.
She did. And she could have easily focused on the fact that it was late, that I hadn't followed the instructions fully. But instead, she chose to focus on the potential she saw in my work.
And what was really interesting was after she gave you that A, she immediately pivoted to talking about strategies for future assignments.
She did. She suggested that I try outlining my papers in advance.
Oh, right. So it wasn't about ignoring the fact that you had, maybe cut corners or procrastinated, but it was about acknowledging that and then immediately shifting the focus to, okay, how can we improve? How can we do even better next time?
Exactly. It was a beautiful example of meeting me where I was at, acknowledging my effort, and then guiding me towards growth and improvement.
Now, in the source material, it even suggests playfully, considering what it might mean to give an A to the proverbial axe murderer.
Yes, I know. It sounds a little crazy, right? But the point is to shift our perspective. It's not about condoning their actions, of course, but it's about recognizing that even in the most extreme cases, there is still a spark of humanity there. And the same goes for, the sullen teenager or the difficult coworker.
It's about seeing beyond the surface behavior to the potential that's there.
Exactly. And choosing to engage with that potential rather than getting stuck in judgment and negativity.
Okay, so we've talked about this giving an A mindset, but what about some more practical tools or techniques? Are there specific things we can do to actually shift our frameworks to move from the world of measurement to the realm of possibility more consistently?
Absolutely, there are. And the sources offer some really great examples. One that I find particularly powerful is the concept of bright futures. And this is something that Ben Zander, the conductor, uses in his teaching. He starts his classes at the New England Conservatory by telling all the students they've already earned an A.
Wow.
Now, imagine being a student in that class. It's like immediately the pressure is off.
Yeah, you're not starting from a place of deficit.
Exactly. You're starting from a place of possibility. And the students have reported that this simple act creates a completely different atmosphere in the classroom. There's a sense of collaboration, of joy, of a shared commitment to excellence. And the letter from the trombonist, Giselle Hillier, is a beautiful testament to the transformative power of this approach.
Oh, yeah. She talks about how receiving that A freed her from the crippling fear of judgment and allowed her to really connect with the music and her passion for playing.
Yes, and she went on to become a very successful musician. And I think it's because she was given permission to embrace her potential without the burden of constant evaluation.
Right. And it wasn't about lowering the standards or pretending that everyone is at the same level.
Right.
It was about creating an environment where everyone felt supported and empowered to strive for their best.
Exactly. It's about shifting the focus from how am I being judged to how can I best express my passion and my talent.
So another technique that's mentioned is the contribution game.
Oh, yeah. This is a great one for shifting our focus from personal achievement to the positive impact we have on others.
Okay. So how does this game work?
So there are three parts to it. The first is to reflect on past contributions. So take some time to think about the ways you've made a difference in the lives of others. Maybe it's something big, maybe it's something small, but just notice those moments where you've had a positive impact.
Okay.
The second part is to notice your contributions in the present. So throughout the day, just pay attention to how you're contributing to the people around you. Maybe it's a kind word, a helping hand, a moment of shared laughter. And the third part is to cast yourself as a future contribution. So imagine yourself making a positive impact in the future. What do you want to contribute to the world? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
It's like that image of throwing a pebble into a pond and watching the ripples spread outward.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our actions, no matter how small they might seem, have a ripple effect, and that we all have the potential to make a positive difference in the world.
And it's about shifting our attention from what am I getting to what am I giving.
Exactly. And when we focus on giving, we often find that we receive far more in return.
So it reminds me of Ben Zander's father and his famous rule number 6.
Oh, yeah, don't take yourself so goddamn seriously.
Which on the surface seems like just a funny, kind of curmudgeonly piece of advice.
Yeah.
But it's actually quite profound.
It is. It's a reminder that we all take ourselves a little too seriously sometimes.
Yeah.
And that we need to lighten up, to have a sense of humor about ourselves and our situation. And your source suggests that his father, who was a businessman, actually used this rule to transform the corporate culture of an entire company.
It's like by taking ourselves less seriously, we create space for more joy, for more creativity, for more connection.
Absolutely. It allows us to let go of that need to control everything, to be perfect, to always be right. And when we let go of that, something magical happens. We open ourselves up to new possibilities.
It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be human.
Exactly. To be flawed, to make mistakes, to be vulnerable.
And to laugh at ourselves along the way.
Absolutely.
So the source material contrasts what you call the calculating self with the central self.
Oh, yeah, that's another key distinction.
So what are those?
So the calculating self is that part of us that's constantly strategizing, comparing, trying to control the world around us. It's the part of us that's focused on external validation, on climbing that hierarchical ladder, on winning at all costs.
Okay.
And it often leads us into a downward spiral of negativity and conflict. Because when our worth is tied to our achievements, to our status, to our possessions, we're constantly in a state of fear and insecurity. We're afraid of losing what we have, of not being good enough, of not measuring up.
Right.
And in contrast to that, we have the central self. And the central self operates from a place of inherent worth and connection. It's not concerned with status or external validation. It's about living in alignment with our values, with our purpose, with our passion.
So it's like that sense of inner peace and confidence that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for.
Exactly. And it's not about being perfect or having it all figured out. It's about embracing our wholeness, our imperfections, and all.
And it sounds like the calculating self is really tied to that world of measurement we talked about earlier.
Oh, absolutely. It's the operating system that runs that world.
And the central self is more aligned with the realm of possibility.
Exactly.
So the source material mentions this idea of an accomplishment program that Ross Zander uses.
Oh, yes. That's a fascinating approach to personal growth. It involves creating a list of all the things you want to accomplish in your life, but not in the traditional sense of a to-do list.
Okay.
It's more about identifying your deepest desires, your dreams, your aspirations, and then approaching them with a sense of playfulness and curiosity. It's about letting go of the need to control the outcome and instead focusing on the journey, on the process of discovery and growth.
And it makes me think of that story you shared about the best sex ever anecdote.
Oh, yes. That was a funny and insightful story about how Roz was able to shift a potentially difficult situation in her marriage by simply reframing her perspective.
Right, because initially there was this sense of blame, of you're not meeting my needs,
Exactly. It was that classic IU dynamic.
but then she shifted to this more playful, invitational approach.
She did, and it transformed the entire dynamic. Instead of focusing on what was wrong, she created a space for possibility, for connection, for intimacy.
And it sounds like this shift in perspective was really key.
It was, because instead of approaching the situation from a place of lack or deficiency, she chose to focus on what she wanted to create, on the possibility of a more fulfilling experience.
And it sounds like this accomplishment program is really about applying that same principle to all areas of our lives.
It is. It's about approaching our goals and dreams with a sense of playfulness, of curiosity, of possibility.
So the seventh practice it's mentioned is the way things are.
Yes. And this one can be a little challenging because it's about accepting the present moment without resistance, even when things aren't going the way we want them to.
Right. It's not about resignation or giving up.
No, it's not about that at all.
It's about acknowledging the reality of the situation and then choosing how we want to respond.
Exactly. And the analogy that's used in the source material is from the movie Babe.
Oh, right. With the cow and the duck.
Exactly. So the cow is standing in the rain, and she's miserable. And she's complaining about how wet and cold she is. And the duck comes along, and he's also standing in the rain, but he's perfectly content. And the cow asks him, "How can you be so happy when it's raining?" And the duck says, "Because I'm a duck. And ducks like the rain."
So it's about accepting what is without judgment.
Exactly. And recognizing that our experience is often shaped by our perspective, by the stories we tell ourselves.
And the source material gives this great example of a family who goes on vacation to Florida.
Oh, yeah. And it rains the whole time.
It rains the whole time.
Yeah.
And initially they're disappointed. They had all these plans for going to the beach, for theme parks, for all the typical Florida activities.
Right.
But then they decide to shift their perspective. Instead of focusing on what they can't do, they start asking themselves, okay, so it's raining. What can we do? What do we want to do from here?
Exactly. And they end up having a wonderful time exploring different parts of the city, going to museums, playing board games, and just enjoying each other's company.
So it's a perfect illustration of how accepting the way things are doesn't mean giving up or resigning ourselves to a negative experience.
It's about recognizing that we always have a choice in how we respond to any given situation, and that sometimes the most fulfilling experiences come when we let go of our expectations and embrace the present moment.
So then we have giving way to passion.
Ah, yes. This is about tapping into that vital, expressive energy that flows through all of us.
Right.
And the source material suggests that the blocks we perceive are often internal rather than external. It's like a river. The water is always there, but it's the dam that we build that stops the flow.
Right. So it's about removing those internal barriers, those limiting beliefs, those fears that prevent us from fully expressing ourselves.
Exactly. And the one buttock playing anecdote, while humorous, really highlights this point.
Oh, yeah, the story about the pianist who was so focused on playing the notes perfectly that he forgot to actually feel the music.
Exactly. And when he was encouraged to sit on one buttock and really put his whole body into it, his playing was transformed.
It's like he was finally allowing the music to flow through him.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that true passion, true expression, involves more than just our minds. It involves our whole being, our body, our emotions, our spirit.
And I think this concept of giving way to passion really ties back to the realm of possibility.
Oh, absolutely. Because when we're living from that place of passion, of full expression, we're not limited by our fears or our doubts. We're open to new experiences, to new possibilities.
Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about leadership. Because the source material has some really interesting insights about how these principles apply to leadership.
Yeah.
And one of the key concepts that's mentioned is the idea of the silent conductor.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that exactly?
So the silent conductor is a leader who empowers others to lead. They don't try to control everything or dictate every move. They create a space for others to step up, to take ownership, to contribute their unique talents and perspectives.
So it's about shifting the focus from how good am I to how can I make this entire group more lively and engaged.
Exactly. And the story of John, the violinist who was given the opportunity to conduct the orchestra, is a perfect illustration of this principle.
Right. It was like a dream come true for him.
It was, and he had always thought of conductors as these, all-powerful figures who controlled everything. But when he was given the chance to conduct himself, he realized that it wasn't about control at all. It was about creating a space for the musicians to express themselves, to connect with each other, to create something beautiful together.
So it was about empowering them to lead.
Exactly. And I think that's a key insight for any leader, whether you're leading a team, an organization, or a movement. Your role is to create the conditions for others to shine.
And then we have the concept of enrollment.
Yeah.
And this is about, well, how would you define enrollment?
So enrollment is about igniting a spark of possibility in others. It's about inspiring them to believe in themselves, to see their potential, to contribute their best.
Okay.
And it's fueled by passion and a belief in abundance.
It makes me think of that anecdote about the flat tire.
Oh, yeah, the one where, you're stuck on the side of the road in the flat tire and you go to the gas station for help and the attendants are just completely unhelpful.
Right. They're like totally indifferent.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you could easily get frustrated and angry in that situation.
Oh, yeah, that's a very frustrating situation.
But instead, the person in the story decides to shift their approach. They start engaging with the attendants in a cheerful, friendly, connecting way.
Right. And suddenly the whole dynamic changes.
It does. The attendants become helpful, they offer solutions, they even pitch in to help change the tire.
So it's like by shifting their own energy, by choosing to approach the situation with a sense of possibility and connection, they actually created a more collaborative reality.
Exactly. And I think that's a powerful reminder that our energy is contagious.
Yeah.
When we approach others with a sense of enthusiasm, of possibility, it invites them to step into that same space.
And I think the story of the failing Eastleigh School is another great example of this principle in action.
Oh yeah, that's an inspiring story about how Ben Zander went into this school that was considered, the worst in the district, and he had no intention of teaching the kids, traditional music theory or anything like that. He just wanted to share his love of music with them, and he trusted that they would respond. And they did.
They did. They were totally engaged.
They were. And the 7 Voices Are Heard exercise that he used is a great example of how to create a space for active listening and participation where everyone feels valued and heard.
Right. And it's about shifting from a top-down approach to a more collaborative, participatory approach.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that everyone has something to contribute, and that when we create a space for those contributions to be shared, something magical can happen.
It makes me think of the story of Anthony, the hyperactive 10-year-old who ended.